Good evening. Welcome to another lesson in Derech Hashem, the Way of God, by the Ramchal. We are now in chapter 5. We are studying about the spiritual realm. Ooh, deep stuff that's hard to relate to. We're in the middle of the chapter. So last lesson, we discussed that spiritual realm is comprised of, there's a physical world and a spiritual world. That's what paragraph 1 taught us. And in paragraph 2 was about how everything that is in the spiritual realm has a manifestation of that itself in the physical world. There's a direct linkage, a chain, it's a connection. Everything that exists spiritually also has something parallel to it in the physical world. We're connected from the physical to the spiritual. We're now in chapter 3, and today's lesson is called Interacting with the Spiritual Realm. And we'll see, really fascinating, how there's two ways, how Hashem made the world. There's two ways how the physical and the spiritual worlds interact. This is very basic knowledge that everybody has to know. If you have any spiritual life, if there's any purpose to your life, you need to know this. How does your physical existence interact with your spiritual existence? So there's two ways. Let's see. Paragraph 3. The existence and state of being of the physical universe thus emanate from these highest forces and are dependent upon them. What in the Hebrew it speaks out, this is the main existence, the real, true, deeper existence of everything that's in the physical universe is the higher spiritual force that's parallel to it, and our physical is a manifestation of it. The true depth of everything that exists in this physical world, your hand, your nose, the table, everything, the true existence of it is some spirituality that's parallel to it. Whatever exists in the physical world is a result of something that takes place among these forces. This is true of both what existed in the beginning and what transpires with the passage of time. I'll just give you a practical application to appreciate what we're saying here. This is a lesson series. You were by it where we discussed vaccines. I said a whole lesson of medical professional conflict resolutions, where the point of the lesson was to bring out a concept, which is really what we're saying here, of medical professionals that deal with symptoms and not the cause. They'll see that there's a cancer, there's some illness, and what they'll do is they'll destroy it. Let's get rid of it. There's a blockage here, let's burn it, let's poison it, let's cut it out. But they never dealt with how did it get there to begin with. That the Western medicine raised their hands, we don't know. Let's do more research. But in the meantime, we get rid of the symptom. Other medical professionals would say, no, that's just destroying the symptoms by doing really unhealthy things, which will cause more illness. We're on page 79. Sorry, page 79, paragraph 3. So there's other fields of medicine who would say the way to deal with it, with the illness itself, is they find the energy source in the body that's causing the illness. They'll deal, there's some problem in the body. Let's fix that. Let's fix that illness to make the body healthier. And they'll, well, as natural medicine, they'll take different food items, which I learned the hard way, how important it is to eat healthy foods, because that has ramifications. But there's also the whole world of Eastern medicine that deal with the energy sources inside the body. Really fascinating stuff. And this has been practiced for thousands of years by millions of people. I mean, there's something to it. And they're saying they're dealing with the source, not just the symptom. So that argument has been going on from all different levels of medical professionals. And my message to all the medical professionals is that Hashem's message, the Torah's message, is what we just read here, is that all their levels are just symptoms. None of them are dealing with the actual illness, because they're all dealing with physical manifestations, some energy, some physical illness in the body, some symptoms of the illness in the body. They're not dealing with, but where did that energy come from? Where did the negative energy come from to begin with? That they don't know. They'll all raise their hands at some point. We don't know that. We'll just try to deal with however deep they get. What we're reading here is that there's a chain. There's a chain event, and it all comes from some spiritual existence parallel to it. And it's interesting, the Hebrew word for sick, you know what the Hebrew word for sickness is? A cholah. It's the exact same word as unholy, a Yom Chol. There's a Yom Kodesh, a holy day, and there's a weekday, which is Yom Chol. Chol is hollow, empty. There's no holiness in it. There's no connection. There's no God there. The source of sickness is lack of God in some aspect of your life. As we'll see in a minute, that's what all spirituality is bringing your connection to God through this chain down to your being. And anything you're lacking in your connection to God will be manifest in some lack of godliness in your body. There's some kind of a sickness, whether it's a intellectual illness, as many suffer from, or a psychological or emotional or physical. There's some lack of godliness in your life that's causing you to think or feel or speak or act in a negative way. It comes from a lack of godliness in your life. So that's exactly what this is saying here, that everything physical has a spiritual source, and that's the truth of its existence. That's the ikar, that's the main part of its existence, the higher forces. We're all dependent on them. That an example would be an illness. What's the symptom and what's the source of the illness? But it's in everything in life. It's regarding a livelihood as well. Everything in life, everything that exists, the source of it all is some spiritual existence, but we're going to expound on this more. Let's go further. These forces, the spiritual forces that are parallel to the physical, were the first things created. Before God created the physical world, he first created the spiritual entities that are parallel to the physical world. And they were arranged in various systems and placed in different domains. The same way, in the physical world, there's different kinds of existence. There's, let's say, the sea, and then there's land, and there's air. There's animals in the air, like birds. There's different kinds of existence. There's the bugs, and there's the plant life, and there's the dirt. There's different kinds of existence. So too, in the spiritual realm, there are different domains of existence. Everything that came about later was a result of this, following rules willed by God, linking these forces to the physical world. There's an exact, very, very complex spiritual world, exactly parallel as much as you see in this physical world. Look at, there's so many animals and so many bugs and so many plant life. It's so complex, even the human body. Well, everything spiritual is exactly like that, if not more. It's all paralleled. And it's not like spirituality, we just have this picture of one simple spirit. It's not like that. It's complicated, and it's exactly the same as we see in the physical world. Everything that happens in the past or present, thus, has its origin in processes taking place between these forces. It all came like when God created the world, and as we learned in our morning lessons, how God creates the world every day, revive the world. It's all going through a process of the spiritual down levels of spirituality till we get to the physical manifestation. So everything in the physical world is a consequence, is a result of the spiritual creation beforehand. The existence, the state, pattern, and every other quality that exists among these forces in the spiritual realm are a result of what is relevant to them by virtue of their essential nature. God made a different nature to each spiritual entity, and what they are and how they interact is according to how God made them. The existence, state, arrangement, and other phenomena involving physical things. So now we look at the physical world. It's amazing how it interacts, the different parts of the physical world. It's all paralleled. In turn, depend on what is transmitted and reflected to them by these forces, following the essential nature of these physical entities. That's a basic principle. Paragraph 3, really important principle to know. We said in paragraph 2 that there is a parallel. They are connected. But paragraph 3 is how it works in time and consistently, always in our life. The way everything happens in the physical world, it starts in the spiritual world. Paragraph 4. According to this principle, now that we lay down this really important principle, how things that are in the physical world are affected by the spiritual realm, they're connected. Every physical phenomenon originates among these higher forces. It's all mazalot. Everything is a mazal tov. It all comes through the angelic world, the constellations, down to the physical world. Everything that happens is parallel. God tells an angel to tell these stars, to tell the blade of grass to grow. Everything that happens in this world goes through that process. There is, however, it is going to blow your mind, there's one exception to this rule, and that includes all things that depend on man's free will. There is an order how the world works in nature. It's called nature. God made rules of spirituality that affects the constellations, that affects the physical world, and that's called nature, Mother Nature, Elohim. There's an exception to the nature, which is what we human beings can accomplish with our free will. Every human being. God willed that man should be able to choose freely between good and evil, and therefore made man absolutely independent in this respect. Man was thus given the power to influence the world and its creatures in any manner his free will desires. So here's something really incredible. We're down here and we're deciding, we're affecting something in the world. So they're all connected. So now what we did down here is somehow going to affect the spiritual counterpart because of the physical world. It's kind of working opposite, which he's going to speak this out now. The world, therefore, contains two opposite general influences. The first is that of natural determinism, which is what God made of nature, the spiritual world, everybody with his abilities, and he's affected by the angelic, the constellations, down to the physical. There's a process of how things work. But there's a second way. The second is the indeterministic. That means what we affect. It's in the language of Chazal, our sages of lesser memory. It's called, there's an Aramaic, isarusa de la ela, isarusa de la sata, which means an arousal that comes from above, and there's the arousal that comes from below. The normal workings of the world is God pulling the strings of creation that makes everything the way it should be, from the spiritual to the physical. And then there's another concept that through our deeds, we can affect ourselves and the world around us. So we're doing the opposite. We're pulling strings. We're making, by our physical act, we're affecting going up the spiritual world. I'll explain it now. The deterministic influence, that's what God affects the world on a regular basis, is directed downward. We speak up and down as in heavens being more spiritual and the earth being more physical. That's what we talk about, these directions. So that which God runs the world from the spiritual down to the physical, from on high, while the indeterministic is directed upwards from below. What we affect in the spiritual is coming from us. This is because the deterministic is the influence that stems from the highest forces. What Hashem makes happen in the world of nature, Hashem created the world, first spiritual, then physical, and he runs the world, first spiritual, then physical. That's how it happens. And therefore, when it is directed towards our material world, it is directed downwards. It comes from Hashem to the angels, constellations, to the physical world. And that's what happens all day, every day. The indeterministic influence, that which we affect the world And the opposite, on the other hand, is the result of man's free will here in the physical world. So it goes the other way around. Since both man and his actions are physical, we are physical beings. We are. The only direct influence that he can have is on physical things. When we say have free will and we choose to do something, we're doing it in the physical world. So we're affecting things physically. Because of the linkage, however, everything physical has a counterpart that's linked to it like a chain in the spiritual world. So because of the linkage between the physical world and the highest forces, however, every time a physical thing is influenced, it also has an effect on its counterpart among these forces. When you do things in this world, it changes the world. Think, what difference could I make? You make a difference in yourself and your surroundings and the entire world. You affect the spiritual world. Since man's deeds in the world below are what influence these forces on high, man's influence is said to be directed upwards. It is thus the exact opposite of the natural deterministic influences. It is necessary to know, however, that even man's deeds are not all the result of his free will. We shouldn't think so everything we do, like we're running the show over here. It's not true either. This is a really important paragraph. While this is true of most of his actions, usually I make a decision, I affect the world. There are some that result from a divine decree to reward or punish him. Sometimes things happen in our life that's not because of my deeds. As we will discuss in detail later in a later section, when we talk about the Hashgacha, God's providence, we'll see that most things are directly because of my deeds. I brought God into my life, that brought blessing through my deeds. I did sin, I pushed God away from my life. I brought illness because of my deeds. That's the usual way. However, there are exceptions to that. There's such a thing as a divine decree for whatever reason. There are reasons for it. Why God made certain things happen for a reason, not to do with your deeds. Such decrees take place in the same manner as other natural phenomenon, where the influence directed downward from the highest forces. So there's always these two possibilities of why things could be happening in your life. It could be because you smoked, so you got the lung cancer. And it could be God decreed that you should get the lung cancer. There's two ways that it could happen. And they're both, we don't always know. We can sometimes find out why. I mean, it might be a sign. If you're a heavy smoker, it's very likely that that's why there's lung cancer. It's probably not a decree. Nevertheless, even in such cases, the elements resulting from the individual's own free will are still directed upwards in the manner discussed earlier. So there's always these two things going on. The regular nature, how we affect the world, and in regular nature, there's decrees that would affect us even not according to our deeds. Let me try to bring this concept a little more into our lives to see how our lives are being run with these two ways in different levels. They're always both true. But for example, in the year, so there's two parts to the year. There's the summer and there's the winter. And the summer, in general, the general principle of summer is the time of light, the time of growth. That's the time when God gave the Jewish people festivals. He brought us out of Egypt. He gave us the Torah. He brought this holiday of Sukkot. All these holidays of raising up the Jewish people to higher levels, it's what's called coming from above to raise us up. That's the concept. That's this first concept. So that's the primary what's going on in the summer. Summer is a time of God is giving his benevolence to the Jewish people, raising us up through the summer months. However, winter is the opposite. Winter is after he raised us up to a certain level, then it's a time of darkness. It's a time where that's all the rabbinical holidays come in the winter. Hanukkah and Purim, that's a time when we raise ourselves through our deeds. We affect the world. That's the time of darkness, as if God isn't bestowing this light upon us. We make the light, we light our Hanukkah menorah ourselves. We make our own light, so to speak. That's the similar similar to these two principles in the world. We have it on a yearly basis, and it's also on a daily basis. Every day, the light, the morning, the morning is God's kindness to the world. That's the daytime. That's what God is giving, shining his light onto the world. And the nighttime is a time for us to introspect, to work on ourselves, to raise ourselves up to a higher level. So the two concepts are always true. It's throughout Judaism, throughout the year, daily, weekly, monthly. The two concepts are always in play, to recognize which one, how one affects the other, meaning what are we receiving from God and what are we doing ourselves. Sometimes we need to celebrate our relationship with God through eating. That's bringing his kindness. And sometimes we do the opposite. We fast. We cut off from eating. We do the opposite than eating. There's two ways of dealing with in the relationship of the physical to the spiritual, either receiving from God's spiritual benevolence to the world, or us doing to affect the spiritual world. So those are these two principles. Let's go to paragraph 5, and you'll really get a different appreciation for Judaism in paragraph 5. God arranged things so that every matter falling within the realm of man's free will should be able to affect the transcendental forces through the indeterministic influence according to the measure and degree set forth by God. God created this world. He made the connection from the physical to the spiritual, and he made what do we do and how it affects the spiritual world. He made the guidelines. This is true not only of man's deeds, but even of his speech and thoughts. When we do things, when we speak, even when we think, we're affecting the world around us. The amount and degree of this influence, however, cannot exceed the limits decreed and circumscribed by the highest wisdom. You should realize from this, Ruthann, how beautiful it is when we talk about a mitzvah, commandments. God said to take the 4 species, or to sit in the sukkah, or to eat the matzah. It's not just do these things. He's telling you through these things, maybe you don't understand how it works, but you're affecting your life. You're changing your life and the life and your spiritual existence. These have an effect. These deeds, how it works, we will discuss more in detail, each one on their own, but to recognize that there is a connection from the physical world to the spirit in the Torah, how to think, how to speak, how to feel, how to act. Those are ways of bringing God into our physical life by affecting through these ways. That's the beauty of the Torah. You can appreciate it on a whole different level if you understand the connection of the physical to the spiritual. It's how the world works, how we bring the spiritual into our lives. Without this guidance, so a person will say, I want to be a good person. What do? How do you bring God into your life? I have no idea. These are guidelines made by the creator of the world. He made the physical, made the spiritual with the connections to them, and showed us how to work it. It's amazing. It's like an instruction booklet for your car. If you don't read it, you won't know how to use it. This is showing you how to affect the world, how to bring God into every aspect of your life. Paragraph 6. Every indeterministic influence, that means what we do, that's not from God, it's from our free will. We affect the world, the spiritual world, through our deeds, however, also results in deterministic influences. So on one hand, it's coming from us. On the other hand, it's now going to be from above. How so? It's kind of like the rain. I was just saying, in the winter time, the time of rain is when we are working on ourselves. Well, how does rain work? Rain works by coming from the sea up to the sky. That's coming from down to up, but then it comes back down. So that's exactly what it's going to say over here. It's a cycle. I just saw a nature video. I was really shocked by this. The same way, did you know the same way that the earth needs water from the sea, and the way it works is the water goes up to clouds and then comes down. So too, apparently, the sea needs dirt from the earth for its for its ecology to survive, and through certain winds of there's dirt storms and the dirt goes into the sea. That's really fascinating, and it helps to rejuvenate the life in the sea. I was really shocked by that. It's the same kind of cycle. In any case, what he's saying here in paragraph 6, when the highest forces are influenced by man's free will, we do things that affect the higher forces, the spiritual world. They in turn influence the physical things that are inherently linked to them. So we did a physical action that brought something spiritual to happen. Now God made that when that happens, it comes back down like the clouds. We send up clouds to the sky when we eat our matzah on Passover. We send up a cloud to the sky, and it comes down this benevolence of blessings of rain. We're going to come down a physical manifestation of tremendous success and godliness in our life because of our deeds. We did something to affect up there, and it will come back down to affect our life. That's the beauty of the mitzvahs of the Torah. So our deeds affect the spiritual realm, but they will come back down to the physical in its manifestation. That's how it works, like a yo-yo. It goes up, then it comes back down. All these processes, however, follow many detailed laws. It's not a simple thing. You're trying to make it simple. It's like a cloud. That's just a parable. It's really complicated. As decreed by the highest wisdom as being best for creation, both the ways through which man's influence reaches the highest forces, that God made in the best possible way, and the manner in which these forces react towards the physical world. There's an action and there's a reaction. We affect the spiritual, and then it comes back down. It's going to affect the physical world. All depends on many factors. All this constitutes the deep mystery of how God's providence works and brings about everything that was and will be. We're going to unravel through this book a little bit of the mystery, but we could start to see already our actions do matter. This is one of the most important principles in Judaism. It's a verse in Psalms. Many say this verse before they wash their hands. They say the verse, to recognize that our deeds bring blessing. Recognize that. We don't wash our hands. It's a verse in the end of Psalms. Is one of the Shir Amalos, I think 120 something. And it's that verse that brings out this principle that our deeds have an effect in the spiritual world, then it comes back down and brings blessing to the physical world. A basic principle in Judaism. Our deeds matter. Paragraph 7. As discussed earlier, God's wisdom decreed that both good and evil exist in the world. God created evil. God wanted good and evil in the world. Like all other things, these concepts must begin among these fundamental forces. When we talk about evil, it's not just there's bad people and there's bad things. At every single level of existence, God made a parallel of spiritual levels of evil. The same way we could see a bad person, there's a bad level parallel to him in the constellations, in the angelic world. There's a whole chain of existence from the spiritual down to the physical of evil, and then have effects in the physical world. God's wisdom arranged the transcendental forces, the roots of all that was created, and set them in an order and system in which it would be possible that there should pertain to them either rectification, tikkun, or spiritual damage called kilkul. God made in the world, there's the good, there's the dark side, and there's the force, there's the good side. There's good and evil in the world, and they're exactly equal. Both powers are exactly equal. And we could either bring good rectification to the world or destroy the world. They therefore have states that are good and otherwise. The essence, this is so important in this next paragraph. The essence of a state of good. What does it mean good? How do you define what's good? Who decides? The essence of a state of good is when a force has the capacity to be illuminated by the light of God's presence. We refer to the godliness as light. light, to bring light to the world. We're a light onto the nations. Do you know what it means, light? The Hebrew word for light. You know what the Hebrew word for light is? Or. So in Hebrew, the words mean something. And the word or, the aleph of the word or, we learned aleph, represents Elohim. It represents aluf, to be a high, dignified level, the godliness that's in creation. So the aleph is the first letter of or, of light. Vav is the hook. That's the chain of events from the spiritual world down to the physical world. That's the Vav, those 6 levels of coming down. So the Aleph is seeing godliness in the physical world. Behind it all is the Aleph. Then there's the Vav that brings it down. And then the Resh. Resh stands for Rasha or Ra. The word itself means, Resh means impoverished. It's empty, emptiness. And that's the evil, that's the emptiness of the world. It's hollow. It's lacking holiness. So light is to bring the Aleph through the Vav to the Resh. That's the light, to see God and bring God into the world. That's what it means to be a light onto the age. It means to bring godliness into your life. So this paragraph, the definition of good is the capacity to be illuminated by the light of God's presence. It means that God is in your life. The opposite state, all evil, the dark side, what is it? The opposite state is that which lacks this capacity, and where the light is therefore withheld from a given force. Even though it's so complicated, it really boils down to something really simple. It's either you have God in your life or you don't. That's it. Any aspect of your life. If it's good, it means God is part of you, is with you in your life. You're doing it with the forces with you. You're with God in your life. Evil, you're on the dark side. It means you're not doing it with God. You're doing it in your own selfish world. You're cut off from the Aleph and the Vav. You're not with Hashem. You're just Resh. You're Ra, Resha, impoverished, evil, wicked. You're not with God. That's all it boils down to. Are you with God in your life or not? The result of the rectification of these forces is everything good that exists in the physical world. If we live with God in our lives, we bring goodness, and everything in the world comes to a higher level. Its converse is the opposite. All evil in the world. People say, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Every bad thing that ever happens in the world is a lack of godliness in the world. If we would work on bringing God into our lives, bring him and allow him in your life, bring the or, the light, bring Elohim, the Aleph to the Vav to the Resh, bring him into your life, then there won't be any chol. It will be holiness, be kodesh. There won't be any hollow. There won't be any resh. There won't be any. They'll bring light. They'll bring light into the world.
That's what Rabbi Miller says about the Holocaust.
100%. It's about everything bad that happened. Everything in history bad that happened is a lack of God in your life. So what's the reaction the Jewish people ever have towards tragedy? Of course, we have to prevent when there's cancer. We got to cut it out. We got to do what we could to stop it. But after we do that, why did it come? Let's bring God into our life and heal and become a higher, dignified, holy person, and we won't get the cancer anymore. Guaranteed. Paragraph 8. It is necessary to realize that the true cause of everything good, whether among the forces from the spiritual world or their effects, that's the physical world, is the light of God's presence. You have to bang it into our heart, drill it in, put it on the wall. The definition, everything that's good is the light of God's presence. The cause of all evil, on the other hand, is the absence of the light. That's all it is. That's all it boils down to. It's actually quite simple. It's quite simple life. If you put it, that's what it all depends on. With regard, it actually says this in the Torah that everything is easy. It says the Jewish people, when God gave the Torah, Moses, to the Jewish people, they complained. They said, my goodness, this is so hard. There's so much. What are we going to do? And you know what Moses' response was? He said, no, the entire Torah, Eino Ella Davar Echad Kal. The entire knowledge of Torah is one simple thing, one simple, easy thing. What's that? Yiras Hashem. Yiras Hashem means awareness of God in your life, If you have that, everything will flow in the right direction. If you don't have that, it won't. That's all it boils down to. One simple thing. Are you living with God in your life? Are you aware of God in your life? So if you are, it brings to many other things. I'm aware of them, so I'm going to change the way I act, the way I speak. It will affect you in every part of your life, but everything will be good. It all flows. If you don't have, so then it's just do this and do that, and it's just too hard. So it all boils down to your awareness of God. We're in paragraph 8, 2 lines from the bottom. With regard to good, however, God is considered its actual cause. God made this good, both in general and in particular. God is not considered the direct cause of evil. So here's something really interesting. When it comes to good, God's presence, the light, so that's God himself. This world of evil, where's evil? What is evil? Is that God or is it something else? You know, the Christian theology is it can't be God itself because God's not evil. It must be there's something else, some dark side that rebelled with God. I mean, it's not true. But what is it? So here's the depth of what evil is, and you understand where Christianity made its mistake from. Like all falsehood is based on something true. There is a distinction between good and evil. Good is God himself. Evil is not direct. The direct is not the direct cause of evil. On the other hand, and we are thus taught that God does not relate his name to evil. It's not him himself. So what is it? God is nevertheless still the indirect cause even of evil. Since its actual cause is the absence of good, evil means it's godliness. He's not there. He took away his light, and is therefore results from the absence of God's light and the concealment of his presence. Although it's not God himself, the evil, it's actually a lack of him, but God made the concept of a lack. He created it. We'll see more in this next paragraph. No bounds or limits can be placed on God's omnipotence, and therefore there is nothing preventing him from creating even evil if he so desires. God created evil. In order for the various concepts of evil to exist, he created a particular root and source. He created Satan. He created the entire spiritual realm of evil. The purpose of the source of evil was to give rise to particular concepts to the extent that the highest wisdom determined necessary so that both man and the world be in its desired state. Regarding the source of evil, the scripture states, God forms light and creates darkness. That's this concept. Light is all good. Darkness is all evil. He makes peace. There's purpose to everything. And creates evil. It's an open verse in Isaiah 45. We say this every day. If you'll take a look in the Siddur. A second. This is in our prayer service. Every morning we say this when we thank God for the luminaries about light and darkness. So we quote this verse. It's on page 93. We say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe." And we quote this verse, "Who forms light, creates darkness, makes peace," and we don't even say the word. We say creates all. The verse says creates evil. God created evil. You should know the Christian Bibles mistranslate this word. This is part of the disgusting, malicious, intentional deceit that the church did, that they changed the word Ra. They mistranslate it because in Christian theology, God did not create evil. So they mistranslate, but it says evil. We don't say the word evil in our prayers because that's our way of speaking. Is what the Talmud tells us. The Chazal, our sages of blessed memory, who instituted the prayers, they didn't want us to even mention the word. So we say it in a nice manner. God created everything. Everything means even the powers of evil. But it's this verse in Isaiah, God created evil. So I'll tell you something really interesting. God revealed of himself to the world 10 revelations, as we speak about all the time, the 10 sfirot in Kabbalistic terms, There's the 3 cognitive, the 3 emotional, 3 behavioral, then the 1 encompassing. There's 10 revelations, 10 commandments, the 10 plagues, and all the 10s are God's revelations to the world. In evil, do you know how many revelations there are? There's 10, there's actually 11. Because God created on top of the 10, there's also 10, 3, 3, 3, and 1, but there's Satan himself that runs the 10, and Satan is separate from the 10. He has all these 10 powers to affect every part of our intellect, every part of our emotion, every part of our behaviors. He's mixed into it, evil, and there's Satan himself who's separate from these 10 forces. So that's the difference between good and evil, what we just said here. On the good side, the light side, God is himself the revelations. It's not separate. We talk to God himself. He revealed himself to us in these 10 revelations. But in the side of evil, God created something called evil, this Satan. And from Satan, God made the lack of light, the darkness of 10 powers. That's 11. That's what the 11s are. There's many, many things in Judaism where we have 10 and 11. 10 is always the power of good. 11 is the power of evil, of the Satan. For example, on the High Holy Days, we say a prayer, Zachrenu l'chaim, remember us for life. Kasveinu b'sefer ha'chaim, write us in the book of life. 11 words in that supplication. The reason for the 11 words is because there's verses in Isaiah and Jeremiah talking about repentance, and all the verses is 11 words. You know what the significance of 11 is? 11 is when we repent. It's when we come back to God. There's 11 forces of evil. When we get out all the evil, we bring light to all forces of evil. There's 11 forces of evil. So that's this concept we're saying here, that God himself is intrinsically connected to the revelations of good. But evil, God made this, God created the concept of evil, and from evil comes 10 revelations. That's 11. We can go through Judaism, you'll see very interesting examples where we see the 10 and the 11. It's fascinating. This source of evil includes many different forces from which all concepts of deficiency and evil originate. God created the evil. From evil, there's so many different concepts, deficiencies. It can affect both body and soul in all the various categories. In every part of our existence, there's evil there. And we will discuss this further in the second section. In general, the activity of these evil forces, both individually and as a whole, that's also really important concept to know, that you and I have our individual evil mixed inside of us, our drives, our ways of thinking, but you should know that there's a general communal evil. I don't know if you were aware of that. Every community, every people has it's like this impure way of thinking, way of acting that's in that community. It takes hold of them. There's
like a country or
every country, you'll see every country has their ways of doing things. Sometimes it could be an evil. I'll give you an example. It says that when Moses went to Sinai to receive the Torah, so he spoke to God, and God said to Moses, "Ein shalom be'ircha," where you come from, do they not address each other first? Which is a very common thing. I've seen places in the world where you bump into somebody, you don't say hello. That is an evil. When you see a human being, you address them. You say, Shalom Aleichem, good morning, how are you? You address a person. And God chastised Moses, in where you come from, do they not say hello? You don't address me? You just talk? That's not basic decency. We need to address the other person. But you see, it's where you're from, in your city. Your city, that's the way they act. And that's what he's saying here. There's an evil on a community. There's an evil on the whole, individually and on the whole. There's an evil in the world. And it depends on the extent to which God's light is absent and his presence concealed. There are more evil countries than others. There are. When you're there, you can even feel it. You're affected by it. The greater this absence of light, the more authority and power these forces have to act, both in general and in particular. When these evil forces gain power and authority, all the destructions in the world, here it is in this paragraph, when evil forces gain power and authority, the force of good is weakened, and those forces which are the roots of all created things are damaged. All destruction in the world comes from that, a lack of godliness in the world. This in turn weakens both the forces and their derivative branches, which are the physical things associated with them. We are taught, when the temple was in existence, there was such wonderful produce in the world. And it says if the Babylonians would have just known, or the Romans would have known how much they're destroying their own physical world when they destroyed the temple, they never would have done it. They don't get this, that according to our physical actions that affect the spiritual and bring down benevolence to the physical world, we have a much better world. When that's destroyed, the physical world is affected by it. When these evil forces are subjugated and deprived of their authority, we take away the evil, bring godliness into the world and the power to act. On the other hand, then the good becomes strengthened. The roots of all created things are then rectified and are set in a good state so that both they and their branches are strengthened. We want to bring goodness into the evil parts of the world, get rid of the evil. Everything therefore depends on the strengthening of these forces. Bring God's light, bring the connection to God into the world, whether it be the concepts of good and evil, the battle between the physical and spiritual, or other matters of perfection and deficiency. When either the forces of good or that of evil gains power, its qualities and effects influence all created things. The whole world changes, both for the roots and the branches. When either one is subjugated, on the other hand, its activities is nullified, and its attributes and effects are removed from the roots and branches of all creations. I tried recently, I'm in the middle of doing this. I started a new lesson series where I'm trying to even teach Christians. You saw that?
Yeah.
I've got a lot of flack from people. Why am I even talking to them? Because there's so much hatred in the world because of the suffering that Jewish people had from the Christians over the years. There's so much hatred in both directions. I gotten over the head from Christians and from Jews. What are you doing? Why are you talking to us? Why are you talking to them? And what I'm trying to do is this. I'm trying to bring godliness, closeness of the one true God into the lives of Christians without stepping on their toes in their theology, but live with God instead of arguing all the time about different theological concepts. Let's just do what you're supposed to do. And the lessons I took, hopefully, that will bring God into the lives, and then all the evil will fall away. I'm hoping all these stupid arguments will fall away, and the evil and the idolatries, and it will go away. Because until what I've seen others do is they just fight. They just fight theologically. I'll prove you wrong from this verse and that verse. And it's been going on for thousands of years by millions of people. But nobody's bringing the light from godliness into the world. I'm trying to do that with even with Christians. Paragraph 9. There are many levels among the qualities of these evil forces and what results from them. And again, this is not a simple matter. The concept is simple. It's the light of God or not. But as you know yourself, life is complicated. There's many aspects to your personality, to your existence, to your being, to your life. There's many parts to your life. There's your husband, your children, the community. There's different parts to life. And so too, there's different levels of good and of evil. In general, their effects are called corruption, evil. Whenever we talk about these words, tuma, corruption, or darkness, pollution, zoam, these are different phrases of evil in the Torah, or mundane, chol, that's what we just spoke about, illness, the mundane and the like. These are all expressions of evil or lack of godliness in the world, different levels of it. Things resulting from the illumination of God's presence, on the other hand, are called holiness, purity, light, blessing, and the like. All those terminologies are bringing God into our life. Holiness, kedusha, tahara, or all those words, holiness, purity, light, blessing. It's all having God in different aspects of your life. These are all general categories. When we consider their elements, however, we're able to distinguish the specific categories and details of these general classes. We can define details, what each word specifically is referring to, and come to an understanding of it. That's what this book is about, the way of God. Around these revolves all of God's providence through which he directs his world. That's going to be the next part, the next chelik, next part of this book is God's providence. We go through the details of how the world runs. It's by understanding the details of these things. What's holiness, what's purity, what's light, how does the world run? For each of these concepts, however, there are agents or for overseers belonging to the general class of angels. God created the spiritual entities that bring out all the physical manifestations of the different categories of holiness, purity, light, blessing, of godliness to the world, appointed to translate them into actions in the physical world. This is true of both good concepts and their opposite. These angelic agents are God's servants, obeying his word. God willed and organized things that his decree should be translated into action through angels, each in their own appointed area of influence. And that's the end of this chapter, the spiritual realm, how God created different levels of spirituality to bring connection to him all the way down to the physical world. So with Hashem's help, we'll start tomorrow evening, our second chelik, which is providence, of seeing how the world actually runs with all the details of godliness in the world. Thank you for joining me. Have a good night.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.